Welcome back to Nurse on Call. This podcast provides emotional support and general education from a registered nurse. It is not medical or mental health treatment and does not replace care from a licensed provider. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency or an immediate danger, please contact emergency services or crisis hotline in your area. Always seek care from a qualified healthcare or mental health professional for individual concerns. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm really grateful you are here today. Today, we're talking about caregiver exhaustion. Not just the physical exhaustion, but the emotional exhaustion. The kind that quietly builds when you spend so much time taking care of everyone else that you slowly stop recognizing your own needs. I think this is something so many people carry silently. Caregiving is often spoken about through the lens of love, sacrifice, and responsibility. But not enough people talk honestly about how emotionally heavy caregiving can become. Not enough people talk about the exhaustion, the guilt, the emotional overwhelm, the loneliness, the resentment people sometimes feel ashamed to admit. And if you're someone who has been carrying the emotional weight of caring for another person, I want you to know before we even begin, you are not weak for feeling tired. You are not selfish for needing rest. And emotional exhaustion does not mean you stopped caring. It means you are human. Today's episode is for caregivers who feel overwhelmed but continue showing up anyway. The people who keep functioning while quietly running on empty. The people who feel responsible for everyone else while slowly disappearing from their own lives. And if that resonates with you, I hope today feels like a safe space to finally acknowledge how heavy caregiving can become emotionally, because your needs matter too. Caregiving can be deeply loving, but it can also be incredibly heavy. I think many caregivers feel guilty admitting that, because society often praises caregivers for self-sacrifice, for always giving, always helping, always being available, always staying strong. But very few people ask caregivers, how are you doing emotionally? Over time, caregivers can become so focused on someone else's needs that they stop checking in with themselves entirely. Their world slowly becomes organized around appointments, medications, emotional support, routine, crisis, responsibility, anticipating other people's needs. And eventually, many caregivers stop recognizing how exhausted they truly are. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care enough, but because carrying emotional responsibility for another human being is extremely heavy. This is true especially over very long periods of time. I think one of the hardest things about caregiving is a constant emotional alertness. Your nervous system rarely fully relaxes. Part of your brain is always thinking, what if something happens? What do they need? Did I forget to do something today? Am I doing enough for this person? What if things get worse? And that level of emotional responsibility changes people. It changes how they sleep. It changes how they rest, think, how emotionally safe they feel. And many caregivers become so accustomed to functioning in survival mode that exhaustion becomes their normal. I also think many caregivers experience loneliness that other people don't fully see. Because from the outside, people may praise them for being strong, but internally, they may feel overwhelmed, emotionally depleted, isolated, numb, anxious, resentful, exhausted beyond words. And sometimes caregivers feel ashamed for those emotions, especially resentment. I think caregiver resentment is one of the least talked about emotional experiences because people often misunderstand it. resentment does not necessarily mean you don't love someone. Very often, resentment is untreated exhaustion. It's what happens when someone gives and gives and gives emotionally without enough support, rest, acknowledgement, or even care for themselves. And many caregivers feel deeply guilty for needing space. They tell themselves, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be grateful. Other people have it worse. They need me. I can handle more. But emotional exhaustion is not a moral failure, and needing rest does not make you selfish. You are still human even while caring for someone else. I think one of the saddest things that can happen in caregiving is slowly losing connection with yourself. Sometimes caregivers become so focused on surviving responsibilities that they stop recognizing their own emotional needs. They stop asking, what do I need? How am I doing emotionally? What parts of myself have I neglected? And over time, people can begin feeling invisible. And this isn't because nobody loves them. It's because their role slowly becomes centered around what they provide instead of who they actually are. And that emotional invincibility can become deeply painful. Sometimes caregivers miss their freedom, their routines, their spontaneity, their emotional energy, their identity outside of caregiving. And grieving those things does not make you ungrateful. It makes you human. I also think many caregivers live with chronic guilt, guilty for feeling tired, needing breaks, wanting time alone, guilty for imagining different versions of life. But needing rest does not mean you stopped loving someone. It means your nervous system has limits, and human beings were never meant to carry endless emotional responsibility alone. I think caregivers deserve far more compassion than they often give themselves, because many caregivers speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to another struggling human being. That is the honest truth. They minimize their own pain, they push through exhaustion, they ignore emotional burnout, they just keep functioning while quietly feeling overwhelmed. And eventually, the nervous system begins asking to be acknowledged. It does that through emotional numbness, through anxiety, through exhaustion, through irritability, and through complete burnout. I think many caregivers wait until they are emotionally collapsing before they finally allow themselves care. Your needs matter before breaking points happen, not only after. You deserve support now, not only once you completely fall apart. I think many caregivers need permission to hear this. I give you permission. You are allowed to have needs too. You are allowed to feel overwhelmed. You are allowed to need space. You are allowed to need rest. You are allowed to struggle emotionally while still deeply loving someone. Those things can exist together. Love and exhaustion can exist together. Compassion and overwhelm can exist together. Care and emotional depletion can exist together. That does not make you a bad person. It makes you human. Another thing I want to acknowledge is that caregiving often changes people emotionally in ways they don't expect. Sometimes caregivers become emotionally numb because they've been carrying stress for too long. Sometimes they become hypervigilant. They stop recognizing joy. They lose pieces of themselves trying to survive emotionally. And if that's happened to you, I hope you stop blaming yourself so harshly for it. Because carrying heavy emotional responsibility over long periods changes the nervous system, and your exhaustion deserves compassion, not shame. One of the most healing things caregivers can begin doing is allowing themselves to exist as human beings again, not just caretakers, allowing themselves moments of softness, moments of rest. Moments where their worth is not tied to productivity or caregiving, because your identity matters too. It almost matters more than being the caregiver, because how can you truly take care of someone when you are not fully at peace, when you are not taken care of? You deserve support while carrying heavy things, not just expectations. I want to say this to anyone who's listening who feels like they are barely holding themselves together emotionally. You do not need to earn rest by completely destroying yourself first. You deserve care before burnout becomes catastrophic. I know many caregivers struggle to believe that, but your humanity matters too. It matters first. Not just your ability to keep carrying everything for everyone else. If you've been emotionally surviving for a long time, I hope you begin responding to yourself more gently, because caregivers need care too. As we close today's episode, I want to remind you of something important. If you've been carrying too much for too long, your exhaustion makes sense. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. You are not selfish for needing rest. And you are not failing because caregiving has affected you emotionally. Human beings were never meant to carry endless emotional weight alone. And if you've slowly lost parts of yourself while taking care of everyone else, I hope you begin offering yourself compassion instead of guilt, because your needs matter too. Your emotional well-being matters too, and you deserve support while carrying difficult things. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you today. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to be here, to be present with you, and to hopefully create a space where caregivers feel emotionally safe, understood, and less alone. Future episodes of Nurse on Call will continue every 2 weeks. Until next time, please take care of yourself gently. Feel free to email me at nurseoncallpod@gmail.com. For anything you'd like, I'm here. Nurse on Call.